Welcome to Right on the Mark with your host, Mark Young. Today I'd like to talk about things you gotta try. There's some things in life that you just have to try, whether you want to or not. This is really funny for me to talk about because as a kid I was very picky and I didn't try a lot of things. So I thought this would be a fun episode where I talked about things that you have to try. I mean, in no particular order, just in foods in general. I mean, as a kid, I liked anchovies. I liked some things more as a kid than I do as an adult. We could talk about Chinese food that I didn't like as a kid, or we could talk about Japan. Certain foods I didn't like. Sushi for sure. I wouldn't try, but there's a lot of foods that I tried as I got older, and there's some food that I will never try again. I mean, it's just some of the things that you pick up going through life is foods that you like to try, and just to say you had it once almost. You know what I mean? So me being a very picky eater, I would really only like certain things on certain days. Growing up as a kid on Sunday, it was always pasta day. It was always some type of Italian dish. My parents always made, I'll say spaghetti or raviolis or tortellinis or, rigatoni, something like that every Sunday. Spaghetti and meatballs was really big in our family. And it was the same recipe that came over from the old country, with the tomato paste and all the natural ingredients that you can get around the Italian store, the local Italian stores. So that was always a dish. Sunday was a pasta dish with, which I really liked. There's a lot of pasta that you can make out there that isn't up to par, that really isn't as good. A lot of people, and I use it now, a lot of people use jar sauce, but, once in a while I will make fresh sauce out of tomato paste and things like that. But that's really just when I have some time on my hands and, for special occasions or something that I just want to try different. Sometimes I'll make sauce with garlic in it. Sometimes I won't. It all depends. It all depends. But some of the foods, I don't want to get off track, but some of the foods that I think you have to try is definitely, without a doubt, a Permane sandwich. Being from around Pittsburgh in the area, you got to try a Permane sandwich. And basically, it's with your choice of meat on Italian bread with cheese, coleslaw, and French fries. It doesn't get better than that. This sandwich was actually made back in the early 1900s, back in, I want to say, in the Strip District with the Permane brothers. Truckers would come in delivering produce and delivering meats and just making deliveries in general. And they were always hungry. 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, they're hungry. So they're wanting something to eat, and they don't have a lot of time to eat it, so they can't be bothered with a bunch of side dishes. So if they had meat, and then they had a side dish of coleslaw, French fries, and bread, it just didn't make sense. Put it all on one and just eat it as a sandwich. And then that's how Permane's got started. A lot of people, don't really take to it. They really don't know what you're talking about. I remember a good friend of mine, Butsy, would come in from Maryland, and I took him to Permane sandwiches back in the 80s, and he's like, "Oh, what's this garbage?" He actually threw pretty much the whole sandwich out and just ordered something plain. I think we just went to a different restaurant after we ate. But some people love it and some people hate it. So it's kind of one of those love-hate relationships with the sandwich, from people all over the country. I remember going to Pitt to visit the lovely Kim when she was in college, and people from far away, I'll say from Philly that were driving to Pitt and we're going home for the weekend, they would actually take these sandwiches back with them to Philly or to West Virginia, or as far as way as North Carolina. They would pack a cooler and put these sandwiches in there and just take them back home to just show them, what Pittsburgh eats. And I always thought that was interesting, watching the college kids pack up these sandwiches and taking them back home just to share with their family. But some of the other things, that I've tried growing up, but I didn't like as an adult is spinach. Spinach is one thing that I thought, I'd watch Popeye cartoons, and I'm like, wow, if I eat spinach, I'll turn into Popeye, and I'll have big biceps and triceps, and all the nine, for the whole 9 yards, it'd be huge. But that really didn't work out, and you have to eat cans and cans and cans. So I kind of gave that up, and a few years later. But There's some things that I thought I'd never try, but I do try. I can remember being a teenager just eating like crab dip and lobster or shrimp, lobster dip and shrimp dip, and even soups. I kind of like that stuff now, but as a kid, I always thought, oh, I'm not going to eat any lobster bisque soup, but I really like it now. Shrimp dip wasn't that good as a kid, but now I love shrimp. So, it kind of goes both ways. You like something as a kid and you don't as an adult, but as an adult, you like some things that you didn't as a kid. So, just some of the other things I could think about is, a fan favorite of my family is halupkis. You know what I mean? My grandmother would make halupkis. My mom would make halupkis. Now my dad makes halupkis. And there's different variations of it. Some people use a lot of pepper. Some use a lot of rice. That not as much ground meat, but everybody uses the cabbage, and you could call those halupkis. You can call those hunky hand grenades. You can call them pigs in a blanket, or you can just call them cabbage rolls. That's what they're probably most known for. But me growing up, everyone called them halupkis. And there's a lot of other specialty food in the Mon Valley, too. You always say that you can leave the Mon Valley, but the Mon Valley never leaves you. And that's really true. Because there's times where, I have a hankering for a Foster House sandwich. I'll go, I can go for a faux host sandwich, like a King Cap faux host sandwich. And, people love that stuff. And a lot of people like that more than Permane sandwich. It's basically a knockoff of a Permane sandwich, but I think with their French fries and with their creamier coleslaw, it just tastes better. At the Foster House than it does Permane sandwich. I like to say Permane sandwiches are a little more drier. And the Foster House sandwiches, a little bit more moist, and it's easier to eat, and it's juicier, and it just goes down a little easier. And I think it's better. I could take either or, but I like both places, so I could definitely eat a sandwich from either place. But if you're in the Mon Valley, Foster House is the place to go. There's a lot of other local places. Joe Gigliotti from Libby's, another fan favorite. He made his own hot sausage, and he made a lot of stuff up at Libby's as a kid. I remember growing up, or at least I think that was him. And a lot of his homemade recipes he still makes now out of his home. He doesn't really own Libby's anymore, but my dad gets a special made hot sausage and certain things, kibasi, from him, and certain cheeses and stuff that he still handcrafts at the store or at his house or something like that. But that's always a fan favorite, local favorite. Some of these shops are specialty shops that are in Monessen that are still going, that are barely surviving. But some people are set in their ways. They just want to have that same food when they go out of the Mon Valley. The food just doesn't taste as good. No matter how much you pay for it, we'll say down in the cultural district in Pittsburgh, where they get all fancy and all their meals are all jazzed up and it's really dressed up and you're paying $30 a dish. And then you find out that the halupkis just aren't as good. I always have a friendly battle with some of the folks at work that I work with. I work with people all over the country. I work with some people down in Texas, California, Indiana, Pennsylvania, down in Atlanta as well. And we always have a friendly game of email game of like who has the better burger or something like that. And my buddy Jason out in California loves In-N-Out, and I have to agree. I think In-N-Out burger is probably my favorite fast food burger, if you want to call it fast food, because it's really not fast food, but they do deliver to you fast. But it's in a fast food setting, but it really is a gourmet burger. And one of the reasons I think is everything is fresh. They don't have any freezers in their shop. They only operate, and I want to say a couple states, like maybe it originated in California, but I want to say like California, Arizona, maybe Texas. Something like that. And the reason being is they can't ship any further because they don't pack anything in freezers, or you don't flash freeze anything. Everything is made fresh and it's on site. And, even the French fries are just handmade right in front of you. They just put them in the grinder and they wind it up and it spits out your shoestring fries. So, a lot of that stuff can't be duplicated coming out here in the East. A lot of that is only West. Which I'd have to say is the top of my list is an In-N-Out burger. But what is a close second, and I always have this argument too over email with my friends at work, is Whataburger. Whataburger does have a good semi-fast food burger. Now that is Midwest. I want to say Texas, Kansas, I think there might be one in a southeast, maybe Atlanta has it, but mostly Texas in the Northwest. And you'll see a couple, through maybe Arizona. But Whataburger is really a big competitor of In-N-Out, and Whataburger really is good. I mean, if you ever get a chance to try a Whataburger and you see it in an airport, or if you see it somewhere in the Mideast, you got to try that, just as you do a In-N-Out burger in California. For sure, that's something you got to try. There's a lot of stuff all over the country. And, for my work, I traveled all over the country. So I've tried different foods from all over the place. And, sometimes they say it's not as good as your home cooking, but sometimes it is. These burgers that you get at different places, you really can't duplicate out here because it's just different meat. Stuff that you get here at, Sam's Club, Walmart, Giant Eagle. The meats are a little different than what they are in the Midwest or even out West, even the Kobe beef is different. They don't really have Kobe beef out here. They more have, I think they have like bison patties, but the Kobe beef was made out west in the California area or Midwest, somewhere out there, and that's really good stuff. That's high in protein, really lean, and really juicy and succulent. So that goes right along with the avocados. It kind of, years ago it bursted onto the scene as being the new trend as an avocado like burger or avocado fries or avocado schmear or just slices. You put it on cheeseburgers, you put it on Mexican, you put it on salad, you put it mostly on anything, and that's how the trend got started. There's just avocados, just plentiful out west, and I never really tried that as a kid. I'm not really sure when that came about, but within the last, I'll say 5 to 7 years, I've tried it, and I actually like it. I don't like too much of it, but I actually like it, so it's not too bad. There's other foods out there that aren't the same as back in the Mon Valley. I can remember eating fish from like the Alpine or like from Tony's Lounge, and I'm like, oh, I love the fish fries. The fish fries are awesome. Or even near me, there's an Italian club in Muse near me, just down the road, and they have really good fish. Fish fries are really known like around Lent, which is coming up in the next month or so. And everyone's always trying to look for the best fish fry to go to. And there's the St. Mary's around me, but Muse Club, I think, is one of the better ones around me. But, the Alpine fish back in the Mon Valley, you can't beat that as well. That was always good stuff. I mean, no matter what they made, it was always good. I mean, they could make, cheeseburgers that were good. They could make hoagies that were good, and even meatballs. But you always got to try an Alpine fish sandwich. That's what I would say. There's other foods that you could try that I think you should try, and a lot of them got passed down to me from my grandparents and aunts and uncles. Like, my grandparents, I'll say Bubby and John, they were always into cottage cheese and pineapple. And I'm like, what kind of combination is that as a kid? But boy, I tried it and I liked it. There's a lot of food that you could put together that aren't supposed to be put together, but if you do, it doesn't matter. I mean, it all goes down, as my Uncle Nick would say, it all goes to the same place. Uncle Nick had a lot of good sayings, but that is true. That is true. No matter what you eat, it all goes to the same place. So he would just, he wouldn't mind if his food mixed up on his plate. He would always tell me that, like, don't worry about it. It's all going to the same place. I could think of one restaurant that I really liked in the Mon Valley, and that was Santoni's. They had some really good roast beef, hot roast beef sandwiches was probably my favorite there, and the banana cream pies were awesome. I mean, Man Katie would always say we have to order dessert first to save it before we ordered our lunch, because if you waited till after lunch, the banana cream pie was gone. And that was true. You just had to order it first and let it sit there, then order your lunch, and then you'd go to your banana cream pie. And that's just one of the places in the Mon Valley that I really like. There was a lot of other places. I mean, geez, I can't think of them all, but I'm just trying to hit the high notes on them now. This podcast would be a lot longer if I basically wrote down every restaurant that I loved in the Mon Valley or around the country. But I'm just trying to hit the high ones. And, there was There was a restaurant slash bar in, I want to say North Bell Vernon. It was called Just the Tavern, or the locals, it's known as Jat. But I can remember they would have a steak and cheese sandwich. That was out of this world. Me and my buddy Jimbo or my cousin Ricky would want to go to Jat to go get a steak and cheese sandwich. I can remember that just being awesome. I mean, the atmosphere was cool. There was a lot of games to play, and the drinks were flowing, and the sandwiches were good, man. I'll tell you what, that place was really good. And it was near Foster House, so that was a good place to go to. Growing up as a kid, my grandfather lived on Knox Avenue, 416 Knox, as a matter of fact. It was near our high school, and I can remember as a kid visiting my grandparents on Knox Avenue, and there was a corner market up on a street, I'll say one or two streets above where my grandparents lived, and it was called Chick's. I want to say it was like Chick's Market, so it was a mom and pop store, and man, I'll tell you what, he had the best ice cream. For some reason, his vanilla ice cream was so good. I could remember just eating almost a half gallon of it. It actually had like chunks of butter in the vanilla ice cream. I mean, at least I think that's what it was little chunks of butter. And man, it was so creamy and so good. I would just crush that. That was so good. And he had other things there too. I remember going to high school. Whenever I went to Menneson High School, we'd have an open lunch for a half an hour or so. And I remember we would all take a walk down to Chick's. And I wouldn't get ice cream, but I would get his Joe's. Chick he was known for his sloppy Joes. I mean, as a matter of fact, every time we went there, we'd go get sloppy Joes with cheese. And I always liked sloppy Joes, but Chick's was always the best. A friend of mine back in the day, his name was Ron, and he would always go, 2 Joes, Chick. Or he would say, 2 Chicks, Joe. Oh, Ron in his high-pitched voice. And Chick would be behind the counter and just laugh. And I remember, I want to say you get 2 Sloppy Joe sandwiches for $1 back in the early 80s. And man, was that good. That was really good. I want to say... Another sandwich, if you want to say, that I really liked as an adult that I didn't like as a kid was a gyro. There's a lot of different sayings on how you could say euro or gyro or gyro or however you say it, but we usually say it as a gyro. And St. Spiridon's back in the Mon Valley, I thought always had the best ones. But from what I hear now, there's a George's in Menneson now that just opened up a few years back, and supposedly they have the best gyro. I have yet to taste it at George's, but next time I'm maybe in the Mon Valley, I may have to hit George up for that to try it. But it's actually where Ben's Car Wash used to be, so I hear good things about that. A lot of my aunts and uncles go there for lunch or dinner. My dad's gone there for lunch and dinner, and, some of my brothers and sisters have been there as well. But I hear that they have some good gyros there. So that's definitely a food that you have to try. Getting back to things you have to try, is this not just food? There's drinks that you have to try as well. I can remember growing up and I remember people saying, oh, you got to try wine coolers, or you got to try these wine drinks like Zima and stuff like that. I've tried it all, like wine coolers and Zima whenever I was of age, but it didn't really quite knock the socks off me. I didn't really like the taste. It was just too sweet, and you really couldn't drink that many, but you really had to develop a taste for those wine coolers and those type of punch drinks, I guess I could say. But, the same thing goes with wine, beer, and champagne. I know there's a lot of people out there that love that stuff, but, I can remember just being a beer and shot kind of guy. Coming from Pittsburgh, that's basically what Pittsburgh means, is a beer and shot type of town, just because of the old mill and stuff like that. People would always get a shot and a beer, no matter what time of day it was. If you worked at the mill and you're coming off the midnight shift, hey, it's 7:00 in the morning. It's time for a shot and a beer and have something to eat before you go home to sleep. And then same thing in the afternoon. If you got off your daylight shift at 4:00 in the afternoon, you're like, well, before I go eat dinner, I want to have a shot and a beer. But that's one of the things that you definitely have to get accustomed to. Your palate's not used to just drinking, shots and beers every day. But I think you have to at least try it once. Boilermakers were also big in Pittsburgh. Not just in Pittsburgh, but I'd say in the Mon Valley. There's a lot of a lot of places that have Boilermakers. There's a lot of places all over the country that don't even know what a Boilermaker is. I could remember one of my things going out of the state or out of like the eastern part of the country and asking for a Boilermaker, and they'd look at me like I'm crazy. Like, what are you talking about? What's a Boilermaker? And they'd be like, wait, are you from Pittsburgh? And I'd be like, yeah. They'd know it by my accent, and I'd be like, yeah, it's a shot in a beer. And it was really hard for them to understand that, but shot in a beer is just standard a drink coming from Western Pennsylvania. But yeah, that's a lot of stuff. I think you have to at least try once. There's a lot of other stuff. There's mixed drinks and stuff you could try, like fan favorites like Long Island iced teas. You have to try at least one. It's not that potent. If you just have one, it's really sweet, and you really can't tell that you're drinking alcohol. It actually does taste pretty good. But that's something when you turn 21 that maybe you could try. But there's a lot of other stuff out there. I mean, my sister Dana is really picky. Like lemonade and iced tea has to be brand name. It always has to be like Nestea or iced tea or something. I'm not sure if she likes Crystal Light or if she likes any of the generic stuff, but it always has to be a certain brand or she can't drink it. It has to be like, I'll say a certain type of like Country Time lemonade. Like I think she was so in love with the picture on the can that she's like, oh, look at these golden crystals of lemonade or iced tea. I can only drink this, and if she doesn't really see the package, she's not going to drink it. Which I think is kind of funny, but that's how certain people are. They're brought up on a certain product, and that's all they'll have. Nothing else tastes the same. And it's not just iced tea and lemonade. I mean, there's certain types of water that taste different. I mean, you have Aquafina, you have spring water, you have Giant Eagle water, you have distilled water, you have purified water, and I think all that stuff does taste different. I mean, I want to say like the spring water makes me even thirstier, so I don't really like the spring water. But growing up as a kid, we didn't have bottled water. You just had tap water or hose water. I remember playing outside and you drank from a hose. That's where you got your drink. Or you went inside and you got a glass and you got a drink out of the faucet. But there's no such thing as bringing a bottle of water with you if you're outside playing. Maybe you could, maybe you could wash out your mom's, jug of like, I'll say vegetable oil and like rinse it out and fill it up with water and take it with you, or bring like a canteen or I guess like a jug or something, but there was no bottles of water back then. But I'm partial to Aquafina water. I just think that's the best. And when I drink any other water, it just doesn't taste the same. But, within the past couple years, I'll say is I've tried, I've branched out. I've kind of given up soda a little bit, and I'm trying to drink more water. And actually, instead of drinking soda in the morning, because I used to be a heavy Mountain Dew drinker, I'm like, how could nobody like Mountain Dew? I mean, it was always great. It was tasty. It was sweet. It was cold, and it was just so much fun to drink, And then after a while, I just started to get bloated on it. So after a few years of that, I went down to like Diet Mountain Dew and like Diet Coke or Cola, something like that. And now I can't go back to the original, because once you drink the diet stuff, you go back to the thick original formula, and it's just I want to say too thick and too sugary. Just too sweet to actually drink. So that's why I drink a lot of diet stuff now. If I have a Coke, it'll be a Diet Coke. If I have Mountain Dew, it's a Diet Mountain Dew. But those are maybe once a week drinks or a couple time a month drink. What I started to drink maybe within the last year is I'm trying to ease into being a coffee drinker. I remember trying a cup of coffee back at a Monessen High School game back whenever I was 7, 8, or 9 years old. My dad sent me up to go get a cup of coffee, and he's like, no, I'll just take it black. And I'm like, all right. So I just go up, get a coffee, just bring it back, and I'd take a sip of it. I'm like, oh, that's nasty. I don't know how you drink it. But it was a cold night watching the Greyhounds play, so he would drink it. But so I just branched out within the past year or two, and I started drinking coffee. The lovely Kim started making me some good coffee, some pour-over coffee, and we would drink it with cream. And, I don't know if she'd put sugar in there or what she'd doctor it up with, but it's pretty tolerable now. I could drink coffee. I can't drink it all day like some people, but a cup or two in the morning, just to replace my soda, drinking in the morning, it's probably better for you from what I understand. So, I'll have a couple cups of coffee, and I'll probably get a little healthier drink in me rather than drinking soda. And it gives you a little bit of caffeine as well. I don't know if it gives you as much as soda in the morning, but I don't really need that much caffeine anyway in the morning. But I think it's just a good drink to have. And all the reports say it's healthy. So, hey, why not drink coffee? Speaking of my Uncle Nick, I could remember years and years ago, I'd go over his house, my Uncle Nick and Aunt Katie's house, and he would always drink buttermilk with his meal. I don't know if he had it in the morning, but he had it with dinner. And I'm thinking, what is buttermilk? I mean, I like milk, but chunks of butter and milk? He's like, oh, yeah, look at this. So he'd get me this tall glass and pour me a tall glass of buttermilk. And I drank it, but it was the weirdest thing. It tastes like butter and it was in milk. And I'm thinking, this can't be healthy. Back then, people didn't really care about healthy. They just ate and drank just because they liked it. But I'd drink a couple of those, but I really never really liked that. Never really caught on with me, but some people just love buttermilk. But so he loved a lot of that stuff, and I just never got into it. So I would just pass on it and just maybe drink whatever else they had, iced tea or lemonade, things like that. I always think that you have to try something, that everyone else is drinking just to see if you're missing out on it, because I'll probably say within the last 10 to 15 years, the coffee explosion with Starbucks and all these other competitors, you always want to try something just to see if you're missing out on it. And if you don't like it, you don't have to keep eating it. You could just always just put it down, just try it once and never go back to it. And with drinks and with food comes, I'll say, amusement parks. And, you always go to amusement parks. Say you'll go to Kennywood or Cedar Point or, you can go to Conneaut Lake as a kid riding rides. And you have your good food, your good drinks. But I think you always have to try certain rides, too, because everyone talks about, like, the Thunderbolt, or they'll talk about the Jackrabbit or the Racers or the Enterprise, or Barron's Curve. It's almost like you got to try it at least once so you could talk about it with your friends. And I can remember one of my first major roller coasters was the Jackrabbit, and I was scared to death. I don't know how old I was. Maybe I was 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there. But I'm like, I got to try it. So I waited till the end of the night, and that was one of my last rides that I ever rode at Kennywood was the Jackrabbit. That night was my last ride. And after that, I loved it, and I wanted to go back, and they're like, no, we're going home. So I had to wait a whole year to go back on the Jackrabbit. So the point being is you might want to try something sooner than later because you just might like it. But there's other places that you have to try too. I mean, if you're ever going to California and you're at Disneyland, there's a lot of rides there you could try. I mean, heck, there was rides that rivals the East Coast rides. There was Montezuma's Revenge, I can remember, at Knott's Berry's Farm, and that was like a loop before the laser loop. I can remember riding that with the lovely Kim, and I actually got a little sick on that ride. I didn't throw up or anything, but she didn't get sick, of course, but I did. So I'm like, whoa, I can't go on these laser loop rides, these Montezuma Revenge rides much longer. And I was only like 18 or 19 years old doing that. So my roller coaster days were over pretty early. Like I'd say by 20 years old, I couldn't do many more because I just get upset stomachs. Kind of just like, on a boat. If you're on a boat, riding a boat, sometimes I get water sick, seasick. So, your stomach's never as good as what it used to be. So I always like to say, try something when you're young, because when you get older, you might not be able to try it. It might upset your stomach. But along with that, I mean, heck, you could go to Disneyland or Disney World and you could try so many rides there. And I encourage you to do so. I mean, you have to get out and try the stuff that people are talking about. I mean, the roller coasters are bomb. I mean, I would like to say that there's, I think I understand that there's like a roller coaster enthusiasts around the world that just go around riding these roller coasters. It's not for me now. I like to go to parks, but only ride the really non-motion rides, if there is any. But mostly I just like to walk around the park and watch everyone else just have fun. It's kind of like going to the In-N-Out Burger. I never see a sad face at the In-N-Out Burger. Everyone is just happy, smiling, and just loving life. And it's just so funny walking into an amusement park. Everybody is just so happy. It's the happiest place on earth, as they say. And so is In-N-Out Burger. It's like I've never seen a frown on anyone's face at that restaurant, nor have I seen them at Disney World or Disneyland. But there's a lot of other things that you could try besides that. I mean, there's sporting events. I mean, basketball, football, wrestling, hockey. Bringing my kids up and at and actually playing in sports myself. I always say it's nothing. A sporting event is nothing like being there. If you're there, you're totally in tune with it. You feel the excitement. You can watch it on TV and you can listen to it on the radio and stuff like that. And you can get super pumped by doing that, but it's nothing like being there. I mean, just feeling the action, just feeling it. I mean, you could just feel the energy and the excitement in the air whenever you go to these sporting events. So I encourage everyone to go out to at least try football, basketball, baseball, hockey, something like that, just to get the blood flowing, just to get a little excitement in your life. So if you've never tried that, I think it's definitely one of the things you have to try. I mean, one of the things I tried about 5 or 6 years ago was Tough Mudder. I never thought I would at the time, but my cousin Rick talked me into that, and he's like, Beef, we got to do Tough Mudder. I'm like, what are you talking about? What is Tough Mudder? He's like, it's nothing. It's like a couple mile course that we'll be able to run in a few minutes and get done with it, just to say we did it. I'm like, all right, cool. Sign me up. Little did I know that I was actually signing a death waiver, and it was a 12-mile run through obstacles while getting electrocuted and staying underwater for long periods of time, plus crawling through tunnels and jumping off cliffs. But that's what Tough Mudder was. So, if you ever get a chance to go to a Spartan race or get a chance to go into Tough Mudder, I think you got to do it at least once. For sure. Jet skis, water skis, fan boat riding. I did a lot of that in Florida. A lot of that on the Mon River, just swimming in rivers and creeks and going fishing. I think you have to try that at least once too. A lot of people are like, oh, don't go in a river. It's dirty. Don't go in that creek. Don't do that. I think you got to try it at least once just to see what it's like. I know it's dangerous, so you definitely want to choose a safe area to go into. But that's what I always did, just to say I was in it once. I didn't really like the fan boat ride because it kind of made me a little seasick, but I had to try it. I did love it. I got sick on speedboats out in Ocean City, but I had to try it. I knew I was going to get sick, but I had to try it. Even water skiing and jet skiing, I don't like to do, but I had to try it once. So that's my advice to you folks out there, is to just try something once. This even goes with places you want to visit. You got to try places you want to visit. Now, I don't consider myself as really well-traveled. I mean, I've traveled all over the country for work and things like that, but I've never left the country, so I'm sure there's a lot of places outside of the United States to go to. But I mean, there's places that I think you should try at least once. I mean, definitely Hawaii, Florida, Myrtle Beach, Ocean City, the Outer Banks. And those are just some of the things I'm thinking of. A lot of places in California you could go to. I mean, San Francisco and riding over the Golden Gate Bridge is without a doubt one of the highlights that you need to go if you go to California. You could probably spend 2 weeks there and just drive up and down the coast on I-5 and just look at the coast, because that's something you're never going to see on the East Coast. You definitely have to go over the Golden Gate Bridge. I think you have to do that once. Do the San Francisco tour, go down Fisherman's Wharf and things like that. And then there's Southern California. I mean, there's a ton of things to see there. I can remember myself and the lovely Kim going there after high school, and we stayed with my Aunt Betty and Uncle Frank in Tustin. And man, there were so many things to do. We stayed out there for 2 weeks, and every other day we would go to the beach, and then on the odd days we would go sightseeing. I mean, so there's so much to see. I mean, come on, there's Rodeo Drive, there's Beverly Hills, there's museums, there's Walk of Fames, there's Sunset Strip, there's Hollywood, there's like I said, museums with like wax figures of the people. There's, studios to visit. I mean, you can go to Universal Studios, MGM Studios, and things like that. Take tours. In fact, we even seen the Hoff there. Got to give him a strum. We were on a tram we rode a tram into Universal, and the tram stopped, and they said, look, there's David Hasselhoff. Everybody wave. And the whole tram waved to him, and he waved back. And I'm like, the Hoff. Gotta strum when you meet the Hoff. It's all good stuff. But, there's other places to go down there in California. Just the West Coast is just different. I can remember going down to Tijuana with my brother and just walking through the port of entry and just getting through customs and things like that. That was back in the early 90s. So things are a little different now. I'm sure there's bigger walls there, tighter security and things like that. But, there was all kind of different things to do in Tijuana. The drinks were cheaper, the food was cheaper, the entertainment's cheaper. You can get we were drinking Coronas for I think they were 25 cents or 50 cents, something like that. I mean, that's how cheap it is out there. And the entertainment, just people watching was enough for us. We really didn't eat there because we didn't really trust the food, and they said only drink something that's under pressure, like Coca-Cola or a beer or something like that. Don't drink the water. So I think that's something you have to at least go into Mexico, not New Mexico, but the actual country of Mexico and Tijuana, and just walk around. I don't know what it's like there now, but I remember it was a lot of fun that me and my brother had walking around there. There's other places, too, that I think you have to see at least once. I mean, come on, there's Niagara Falls. Who doesn't want to take a boat ride through Niagara Falls and go on the other side of the falls? I can remember going there with my grandparents and my sister Dana, and you'd wear a raincoat and a hat. And I remember touching the falls, underneath the falls on the backside, which I thought was really cool because, not many people. In fact, I don't even think you were supposed to go that far, but I just walked right past the signs and went and touched the water to say I touched the water going over Niagara Falls. I thought I was pretty safe. My footing was pretty secure. So I leaned over and just touched the water just to say I could. So that was always fun to do. I don't want to say that go ahead and do that, but I always stretched what I was allowed to do just because that's the type of person I was. But, definitely do that at your own risk for sure. There's other stuff. I mean, I went to Boston in 2000, and I got to tell you, Boston was something else. It was an amazing town, friendly town, things to do. I went to go see a Celtic Supersonic game in 2000, and man, that was just fun. And plus the food and drink, we went to go see the place Cheers. So I bought a lot of souvenirs there, took a lot of pictures there. Me and my one buddy, Tom, from work went. We took a train from Pittsburgh to Boston. I don't really recommend that because it took like a good 24 hours to get there on a train. And of course, I got sick just riding on a train because pretty much that motion for a whole day gets you sick. We didn't have any place to sleep. We had to sleep in an upright chair because we didn't splurge to get the bed, whatever. The beds they had on the train. I don't even know if they had them back then, but we should have opted for that if they had it. But, that was always fun. That was fun. It was super cold there. I mean, I can remember just being there at midnight, and it was like well below zero. And it's a different cold than here in Western Pennsylvania. I mean, you go to Boston, you go to Massachusetts, it's a different cold. I mean, it's bone. It hits your bone without a doubt. I can remember walking to the Boston Garden from our hotel, and I'll say it was 3 blocks. I remember me and my partner, Tom, we would have to duck into certain restaurants and bars and lounges just to get warmed up for maybe 5 or 10 minutes and go back out, walk another 100 feet, and then duck inside a place to get warmed up, go outside, walk 100 feet just to go inside. And I saw the people that were Bostonians just walking around like it's nothing. I'm like, dude, this is unreal, man. So they are used to cold, which I can never get used to that cold up there. I thought I was used to cold here in Pennsylvania, but nah, it's nothing like up there in Boston for sure. I mean, that's a different kind of cold. I've never felt that before. That's probably why I never went back. If I went back, I'd probably go in the spring or summer when it's nice. But Boston is definitely worth the trip. I could, same thing goes for New York. I've only been to New York once, but man, I'll tell you what, New York is a blast. And I think you need to go there at least once. I mean, you got to see Times Square. Come on. You see it on TV all the time. You got to go visit it. I mean, I've yet to go to the Thanksgiving Day parade. That is something I'd like to go see. I haven't done that. I've watched it on TV a ton of times, but I visited Times Square with one of my other work buddies, Kevin, and we had a blast. I mean, we ate dinner, we people watched, we sat on the bleachers, and we just watched all the billboards and all the freaks out there in New York. I mean, it was a blast. And one of the best ideas I ever had was we got to try a Manhattan drink. Since we're in Manhattan, we got to have a Manhattan. For sure. I mean, it was one of the tastiest Manhattans I've ever had. In fact, we got 2 each. They were about $12 a piece, so it wasn't that bad, actually. I mean, I could spend $10 or $12 around here locally in Canonsburg and Pittsburgh and pay that much. So it wasn't that expensive in Times Square, but I always remember that. So you got to have a Manhattan while you're in Manhattan. So that's always a fun thing to do. There's a lot of other places to visit New York. We just went around and saw some of the local places around town, like where Jimmy Fallon films, and like Rockefeller Center, and like where Good Morning America is, and things like that. Where they film, and outside that famous bakery outside of I want to say the Today Show where they sit. So there was a lot of things to do out there. So I definitely highly recommend it. I think you probably need to do that at least once anyway. And all these sites that I've seen basically just happened by chance. Some of them I planned. This New York trip I didn't plan. It was just something spur of the moment that we happened to be nearby. We parked our car, took the subway, and went down there. I'll say the same thing with D.C. I think you need to see D.C. at least once. The White House, you got to go see Lincoln's Theater. You got to go see the Monument. I think D.C. is up there too, right up there with New York. You got to definitely go visit them. Go through the Wax Museum, see all the different presidents and things like that. I mean, we never toured the White House because the lines were always too long. In fact, I don't even know if you could do that anymore. But, the lovely Kim went down there plenty of times. When my brother worked in D.C., I mean, there was times we'd go to sporting events. We would go, just go cruising around. I can remember when 9/11 happened in Pentagon, plane crash into the Pentagon. I was with my brother and my buddy Butts. We went to a Bullet game back then, and he drove us past there, and it was unbelievable just to see the plane go through and all the wreckage at the Pentagon. It was roped off at the time, so we weren't able to walk up to it, but we were able to drive and walk by it, and that was just amazing. And if that plane did that much damage at the Pentagon, I can't even imagine going to Ground Zero. I know people that gone to Ground Zero that came back and said it was unbelievable. They were a changed person after they saw that. What I saw was probably nothing compared to 9/11, but I'll tell you what, seeing the Pentagon all blown to pieces and shrapnel and just plane parts all over the place, I mean, that was crazy. But it just so happened to be around the same week of the basketball game that we decided to go to. So that was something to see as well. But DC is definitely up there. You got to go there at least once. Probably travel the East Coast and go up and down there. There's a lot of things to see there. Like I said, there's so many things to point out. I'm just trying to think of some highlights. There's not only just food and places and things and stuff. I mean, churches. I can remember all the churches that we had back in the Mon Valley. They have now merged or basically moved out of the Mon Valley. But there's different churches back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I can remember going with my grandmother, Bubby, and going to St. Mary's Church, I think it was called. And it was a Byzantine Catholic. We were brought up as Roman Catholic whenever I went to school and went to church. But going to Byzantine was a little bit different. You basically had to carry a tune. Like, it almost seems like you shouldn't go to that church unless you could sing. So that was always fun. And they sang different songs. And the priest was always fun-loving. Father Pravensky was always fun-loving. And, he made it interesting. Always made it interesting. And just the way he sang and his voice and all that. And, communion was a totally different thing. I loved communion. I mean, you'd go up there and you'd have a crouton dipped in wine. And I'm like, what is that? I'd say to my Aunt Katie, what is that? It's so good. She's like, you want to go up again, don't you? I'm like, oh, man. And we'd always go to church before we went to lunch. So, man, that was like a dynamite tasting communion. That's one thing I always remember about that is that communion. I don't know what they used. It had to be wine and bread, but man, it was good. And they served it to you on a spoon. But I always thought that was weird because I know that spoon touched my tongue a few times. And if it touched my tongue a few times, imagine how many other people's tongues it touched. So that was kind of weird. But, I just went with it back then and thought nothing of it. But, I think that's something that you should try. If you're Catholic by faith and you want to try a different church, I think Byzantine would be the way to go. I don't know if they still do the same things they did back in the 70s and 80s, but it sure made the hour interesting. And you always paid attention at that church because they were always singing and moving, and there was always something to watch. So I always liked that type of church. The churches that I belonged to, St. Leonard's, it was the same thing every week and the same read every week. It was some singing, but wasn't as much. It wasn't as I'll say as outgoing as his Byzantine churches. So you definitely have to carry a note if you're going to go to that church. Not sure if that church is still open, but I'd like to wrap it up with that. That's a lot of places, people, and things to do, things to see. And I think you got to try it once. And I'd love to hear what you guys tried and what you'd like to try. And if I've inspired any of you to try some of this stuff, I'd like for you to leave some comments below. Let me know how it went, and let me know what you thought of this podcast. I'm out here for you, and I'm trying to keep it interesting and trying to keep it real. That's about wraps it up for Right on the Mark with your host, Mark Young. Don't forget to like, subscribe, tap the bell. See you next time, folks.